Good morning, children. Today we are going to read Chapter 1 Tom Sawyer's Toothache. Toothache. Ache. What do we mean by the word ache? Ache means pain. We may have a headache, a stomach ache. Similarly, Tom had toothache. This story is written by Mark Twain. Mark Twain was not the writer's real name. His real name was Samuel L. Clemens. He was known to the world by his pen name Mark Twain. Samuel L. Clemens was born in Missouri, a state in the Midwestern United States, in 1835. He was an American writer, humorist, entrepreneur, publisher, and lecturer. He was lauded as the greatest humorist the United States has produced. He has many novels to his credit. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and its sequel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Life on the Mississippi, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today are some of the very famous ones. He was also regarded as the father of American literature. He died in the year 1910. Before reading the chapter, let me tell you the story of it. This story is a small episode of Tom Sawyer's life in the novel The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Here, Tom Sawyer suffers from Monday blues. Monday blues. Children, have you heard this word before? Monday blues. Blues means sad feeling. Monday blues mean the negative emotion or the sad feeling that a few people get at the beginning of a work week after the work-free weekends. This means a few people feel lazy or lack interest to go back to work after the work-free weekends. One such Monday morning, Tom wakes up and starts thinking of excuses. Excuses to assure Aunt Polly that he was really not well, so that she would allow him to stay back at home. He really wished he was sick. He starts thinking of excuses. Stomachache! Yes! That was the first excuse that came to his mind. He thinks, if Aunt Polly comes to know that I have a stomachache, then she would surely ask me to stay back at home. He starts imagining of having a stomachache. And he has that imaginary pain too. But since it was his imagination, the imaginary pain subsided very soon. He understood that this idea was not a good one, so he discarded that idea. He starts thinking again. Yes, a toothache. A toothache would work. He had a toothache last week too. He thinks, if Aunt Polly comes to know that I have a toothache, she would surely ask me to stay back at home. How happy he was! But soon he realized that she could pull out that loose tooth too, which could pain him, and he was not ready to bear that pain. So he discarded that idea too. Now he started thinking on a serious line because he had to have an excuse in order to stay back at home. Yes, a sore toe. A sore toe would do. He thinks, if Aunt Polly comes to know that I have a sore toe, she would definitely ask me to stay back at home. After all, how could I go to school with a sore toe? Yes, he finalizes on this excuse. He decides to groan loudly because, in order to actualize his excuse, someone should know about it. Who else could it be better other than Sid, who was sleeping next to him? He groans louder and louder, but Sid seemed to ignore his cries as he was fast asleep. Finally, in order to wake him, Tom shook him. Sid woke up, stretching his arms and legs. Looks at Tom. Tom, what's the matter? Why are you crying? Tom said, Don't touch me. I have a sore toe. He said so as if he was going to die of the sore toe. Hearing this, little Sid was confused. He was tense. He ran downstairs to call Aunt Polly. Aunt Polly, come fast. Tom's going to die. Hearing this, Aunt Polly's face grew pale. Her legs trembled. She somehow managed to reach Tom and asked, Tom, what's the matter with you, child? To which Tom says, Aunt Polly, my sore toe seems mortified. Hearing this, Aunt Polly sank into the nearby chair, laughing and crying at the same time. Poor lady. She laughed because she understood this was one of his silly excuses to stay back at home. Nobody would die because of a sore toe. She cried because nothing serious had happened to Tom. She told Tom to just shut up and climb out of the bed. His groans ceased. His pain vanished. Tom felt a little foolish, but still stuck on to his excuse and said, Aunt Polly, it did seem mortified, and it hurt me so badly that I almost forgot the toothache I have. What? You have a toothache? Yes, one of my tooth is loose and it aches awfully, said Tom. Oh, so you have a loose tooth. But Tom, nobody is going to die because of a loose tooth. Mary, get me a silk thread and a chunk of fire out of the kitchen, said Auntie. Tom understood why these things were asked for. He knew Aunt Polly would pull out that loose tooth and it would pain him very badly. He pleaded, Aunt Polly, please don't pull it out. It will hurt. I don't want to stay at home. I want to go to school. Oh, really? You really do want to stay at home? Tom, I know you made all these excuses to avoid going to school. Tom, I love you very much, but please don't break my heart this way. By this time, the silk thread and the chunk of fire were ready. Aunt Polly tied one end of the silk thread to Tom's tooth and the other end to the bedpost. She then grabbed the chunk of fire and suddenly thrust it almost into the boy's face. Tom, seeing the chunk of fire come towards him, immediately took a back step. And lo! The tooth hung dangling by the bedpost. Tom could not utter a word. He had to bear the pain of it. He very quietly had his breakfast and left for school. Tom showed his tooth to his friends at school. Meanings of a few words are already given in the chapter. Here I have a few more for you. Detect, notice, discover. Feeble, weak. Groan, to make a deep sad sound because you are in pain. Sore toe, painful toe. Yawned, to open one's mouth and breathe in deeply, especially when you are tired or bored. tremble, to shake or shiver when you are frightened, gasp, to take a sudden loud breath with your mouth wide open, usually when you are surprised or in pain. Seize, stop, chunk, a large or thick piece of something. Row, a noisy argument. Seized, take hold of suddenly and forcibly. Nevertheless, in spite of a few words which are to be pronounced properly. The first word is morning. In morning, the letter R is silent. The next word is yawn. Then seize. The next word is also seize, but there's a difference in the meaning. The first seize means to stop, and the second seize, that is S-E-I-Z-E, means to grab. Next is awfully, outrageousness. Let's read the chapter. On Monday mornings, Tom Sawyer usually felt miserable. He lay in bed thinking. He wished he was sick. Then he could stay home, away from school. He investigated if he had any ailment, but found none. Tom thought he could detect some colicky symptoms, but they soon grew feeble and then died away. One of his upper front teeth was loose. He considered it lucky and was about to begin to groan when it occurred to him that Aunt Polly would pull it out and it would hurt. So he pretended that he had a sore toe. It hurt so much that he groaned loudly. But Sid was fast asleep and snored on. Tom was aggravated and said, "Sid, Sid," as he shook him. Sid yawned, stretched, and woke up. He stared at Tom and said, "What's the matter, Tom? I must call Auntie." "No, never mind. It'll be over by and by, maybe. Don't call anybody." But Sid flew downstairs and said, "Oh, Aunt Polly, come, Tom's dying." "Dying?" "Yes, don't wait, come quick." Aunt Polly fled upstairs with Sid and Mary at her heels. Her face grew white and her lips trembled. When she reached the bedside, she gasped out, "You, Tom, what's the matter with you, child?" "Oh, Auntie, my sore toes, mortified." The old lady sank into the chair and laughed a little, then cried a little, then did both together. She told Tom to shut up and climb out of the bed. His groans ceased. The pain vanished. Tom felt a little foolish and said, "Aunt Polly, it seemed mortified and it hurt so I never mind my tooth at all." "What's the matter with your tooth?" "One of them is loose and it aches awfully." "Well, your tooth is loose, but you're not going to die about that." "Mary, get me a silk thread and a chunk of fire out of the kitchen," said Aunt Polly. Tom said, "Oh, please, Auntie, don't pull it out. It doesn't hurt any more. I don't want to stay away from school." "Oh, you don't? Don't you? So all this row was because you thought you'd get to stay home from school and go off fishing? Tom, Tom, I love you so much, and you seem to try every way you can to break my old heart with your outrageousness." By this time, the dental instruments were ready. The old lady made one end of the silk thread fast to Tom's tooth with a loop and tied the other to the bedpost. Then she seized the chunk of fire and suddenly thrust it almost into the boy's face. The tooth hung dangling by the bedpost. Now, Tom left for school after breakfast, although he did not desire it. Nevertheless, Tom showed his tooth to his buddies in school.